The driver didn't say a word when he pulled my suitcase out of the trunk. He just set it on the sidewalk, gave me a polite nod, and drove away. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the house. It was bigger than I remembered from the photos my daughter had sent me. A pale gray two-story colonial with white shutters and a wide front porch. There were potted hydrangeas on either side of the door. My daughter always did love hydrangeas. I used to grow them in the backyard of the house where she grew up. I told myself that was a good sign. I was 68 years old, recently widowed, and I had driven 1,200 miles worth of life decisions down to this one moment, standing on my daughter's sidewalk with 2 suitcases and a heart full of hope. My husband Gerald had passed 8 months earlier, a stroke, sudden, no warning. After 41 years of marriage, I came home from the grocery store one Tuesday afternoon, and he was just gone. The doctors said he didn't suffer. I told myself that was a good sign too. I was getting very good at telling myself things. After Gerald died, our house in Asheville felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every room held something of him: his reading chair, his coffee mug still on the counter, his handwriting on the notepad by the phone. My sister suggested I sell and move closer to family. My daughter called and said the same thing. She said she had plenty of room. She said it would be wonderful to have me nearby. She said her daughter, my granddaughter, was growing up so fast, and I was missing everything. So I sold the house. I packed what mattered and donated the rest, and I came. My daughter opened the front door before I even reached the porch steps. She looked beautiful, she always did, wearing a cream linen blouse, and her hair pulled back the way she wore it when she was trying to look effortlessly put together. She hugged me at the door, a real hug, both arms, the kind that made me feel foolish for ever worrying. "Mom, you made it," she said. Come in, come in." The inside of the house was everything the outside promised. High ceilings, hardwood floors, a kitchen that opened into a living room full of soft, natural light. My granddaughter came running down the stairs and threw her arms around my waist, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for 8 months straight. My son-in-law came out of his home office and shook my hand. He was cordial. He asked about the drive, whether I was hungry, whether I needed anything. He was always cordial. In 20 years, I had never been able to tell what he actually thought about anything. "We thought we'd show you your space before dinner," my daughter said. And something in the way she said "your space" made me pay attention. I assumed she meant the guest room. She had mentioned a guest room. We had discussed it specifically, a room on the 2nd floor, with its own bathroom and a window that looked out over the backyard. She had sent me a photo of it in the spring. Fresh white walls, a window seat, a small writing desk. She did not lead me upstairs. She led me toward the back of the kitchen, past the laundry area, and down a narrow set of stairs I hadn't noticed before. My son-in-law followed with my suitcase. I told myself maybe she had renovated. Maybe there was a lovely finished basement apartment. Lots of people had those. The stairs were steep. The light at the bottom was a single bare bulb on a pull string. My daughter reached out and tugged it, and the room flickered into view. It was a storage basement, not renovated, not converted. A storage basement. Concrete floor with a foam mat laid over part of it. Exposed pipes running along the low ceiling. Cardboard boxes stacked 3 feet high along the far wall. Holiday decorations. Old tax returns. The kind of things families push down into basements and forget. In the corner there was a folding cot with a fitted sheet pulled over it, and a pillow in a case that didn't quite match. Beside it, a small table with a lamp that I would later discover hummed constantly when it was on. "We cleaned it up as much as we could," my daughter said. "I know it's not the guest room, but we've been using that as an office space. This is actually really cozy once you get settled, and it's private." I looked at the low ceiling. I looked at the boxes. I looked at the cot. I am a woman who raised 2 children largely alone, while working full-time as a school librarian for 32 years. I have organized fundraisers, mediated disputes, survived the death of my parents and my husband. I know how to hold myself together when something is wrong. "It's fine," I heard myself say. "I just need to freshen up." They left me there. My daughter said dinner would be ready in an hour. My son-in-law set my suitcase by the cot without looking me in the eyes. The bare bulb swung slightly when they closed the door at the top of the stairs. I sat on the edge of the cot and pressed my hands flat against my knees. I want you to understand something. Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why didn't she say something? Why didn't she walk back up those stairs and tell her daughter that this was not what was discussed? You're thinking a self-respecting woman would have called a hotel within the hour. I understand why you'd think that. But here is what happens when it's your child. Here is the thing no one tells you. When you have loved a person since before they could speak, since before they could walk, since you sat up at 3 a.m., holding them through fevers and nightmares, when that person disappoints you, your first instinct is never anger. Your first instinct is to wonder if you're wrong, to wonder if you're being too sensitive, to wonder if you're making something out of nothing because you're grieving and tired, and you drove 1,200 miles, and maybe you just need to eat something and sleep, and everything will look different in the morning. Love doesn't make you stupid, it just makes you slow to give up. So I freshened up. I went upstairs. I ate dinner at their table with my granddaughter chattering about her soccer team, and the conversation was pleasant and normal, and almost made me believe I had imagined the whole thing. My daughter poured me a glass of wine. My son-in-law told a story about a coworker that was mildly funny. My granddaughter showed me a drawing she'd made of a horse. I went back downstairs and slept on the cot. The foam mat shifted during the night. The pipe above me knocked every time someone used the upstairs bathroom. At 5 in the morning, the water heater in the corner of the basement cycled on with a sound like a minor industrial accident, and I was awake for good. I lay there in the humming lamplight and I thought, one more day, give it one more day. She's adjusting. You both are. The next morning I went upstairs early and made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my daughter came down, still in her robe, and she looked at me like she'd forgotten I was in the house. You're up early, she said. I've always been an early riser, I said. You know that. She made a sound that wasn't quite agreement, and poured her own coffee, and looked at her phone. I asked if I could take my granddaughter to school that morning. My daughter said she had already arranged the carpool. I asked if there was anything I could help with around the house. My daughter said she had a cleaning service. I asked when she thought we might look at some of the senior apartments in the area. I had been researching them as a long-term plan. She said she had heard the fees were very high. I noticed that. I noticed the way she said it, and the way her eyes moved to her husband briefly when she did. But I let it pass. The first week settled into a pattern that was polite and hollow. I spent most of my time in their kitchen or sitting in the backyard. I helped with dinner when I was allowed. I played with my granddaughter in the afternoons. I slept on the cot while the water heater knocked, and the pipes spoke their language through the ceiling. My daughter bought me a small space heater for the basement. She brought it down herself and plugged it in and said, "There you go," like she had solved something. I thanked her. I was still telling myself things were good signs. It was on a Thursday, 12 days after I arrived, that everything changed. I had come upstairs to get a glass of water. It was late afternoon. I hadn't realized my son-in-law was home early from work. I heard voices in his office, the door not fully latched, and I heard my own name. I stopped walking. I am not a person who eavesdrops. I want to be clear about that. I was not standing in a hallway trying to catch them in something. I was simply holding a glass of water, frozen, because I had heard my name in a tone of voice that didn't sound like nothing. "She's not going to be here forever," my daughter was saying. "That's not the point," my son-in-law said. "The point is what we do now, while she is here. You said she sold the Asheville house. What was that property worth?" A pause. $380, my daughter said. "Maybe $400 after the market. And Gerald's life insurance." She mentioned around $250. Another pause. "So she's sitting on $600,000, maybe more, living in our basement. She's not living there forever," my daughter said again. And her voice had changed lower, careful, like she was talking herself into something. "But we have time. The financial situation is what it is. The business loan is coming due in February, and we're already behind on the equity line. I've been thinking, if I approach it right, if I frame it as an investment, she's always wanted to feel useful. She'd feel like she was helping." "You have to be careful how you ask," he said. "I know how to talk to my mother," she said. I stood in the hallway for a long time after they stopped talking. I have tried, in the months since, to describe what it felt like. It wasn't like a wound, exactly. It was more like the moment you step off a curb you didn't know was there, that split second of falling before you catch yourself. When your whole body understands something your mind is still catching up to. I had sold my home. I had packed my life. I had driven 1,200 miles because my daughter called and said come, because she said she wanted me close, because she said she missed me, and she had put me in a basement, and now I understood why. I walked back down the stairs very quietly. I sat on the edge of the cot. The water heater hummed. The lamp hummed. I put my face in my hands, and I let myself cry, because I was alone, and I had earned it. Then I dried my face. And I started thinking clearly for the first time since Gerald died. Here is what I knew. I had $640,000 in a money market account that I had not told my daughter the precise amount of. I had my health, my mind, and 32 years of professional experience in organization and management that people consistently underestimated because I had done it in a library. I had a sister in Portland who had been calling me every week since I left, asking if I was all right, and I had been lying to her. And I had, apparently, a daughter who loved me the way people love something they intend to use. Here is what I decided. I would not confront her. Not yet. Because I had learned something from 32 years of working with the public. People who know they've been caught change their behavior. People who don't know you know will show you everything. So I acted normal for 4 more days. I was cheerful at dinner. I played with my granddaughter. I let my daughter think her plan was progressing naturally, that I was becoming settled, comfortable, dependent. On the second day, she started a conversation about how expensive everything had gotten, how the housing market was brutal, how she and her husband had a wonderful opportunity, but the timing with capital was always the challenge. She was very subtle about it. I almost admired the craft of it. I said, and I understand. And that does sound difficult. And I went back down to the basement and continued making phone calls. I called my sister first. I told her everything. She was furious, that particular quiet fury that older women have, the kind that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. She said she'd been worried since I first called and said the guest room had been repurposed. She said, come here. Come now. My spare room has a real bed and a door that locks, and I will make you coffee every morning for the rest of my life. I told her. Soon, I called Gerald's attorney, a man I had known for 15 years, and asked him to help me update my estate documents. Then I called a senior living community 12 minutes from my daughter's house, a lovely, independent living complex I had found while sitting on the cot with my phone, looking at options in the area. I had found it because I had been researching since week 2, when the cot started giving me back pain, and the space heater wasn't enough against the January cold that came through the concrete floor. I scheduled a tour. The woman on the phone was warm and professional, and she told me they had a first-floor unit with a full kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and large windows that faced a courtyard garden. I cried a little after I hung up, but these were different tears. On the 5th day, my daughter came to me with the proposal. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, my granddaughter in bed, my son-in-law conveniently in his office. My daughter sat across from me on the couch, and she folded her hands the way she used to when she was 12 years old and wanted something. And I felt a grief so specific and so precise that I cannot properly name it. She talked for about 10 minutes, about the business loan, about the equity line, about the opportunity that was right there, if only the timing were different, about how much it would mean to have the family working together, about how Gerald would have wanted the money to do something real in the world rather than sitting in an account. She did not mention the basement. When she finished, I looked at her for a long moment. I looked at the face I had memorized before she could hold her own head up. I thought about 1,200 miles. I thought about the cot and the humming lamp and the pipe that knocked at 3 a.m. I thought about her voice through the office door. I know how to talk to my mother. I need some time to think about it, I said. She smiled. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Of course, Mom. There's no rush. There was a rush. February was 6 weeks away. But I nodded and said goodnight and went downstairs. 2 days later, I moved out. I did not make a scene. I got up early, before anyone was awake, and I called a car. I packed both suitcases with practiced efficiency. I had been packing a little each night for a week. I carried them up the stairs one at a time and set them by the front door. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. The note said, "I love you. I love your daughter. But I will not be investing in your business, and I have made other living arrangements. The guest room is yours again. Please don't call me until you're ready to be honest with me about why you put me in the basement." Then I got in the car and I went to the hotel I had booked the night before, a clean, comfortable place 5 miles away. I ordered room service for the first time in my adult life, eggs Benedict and orange juice, and I sat in a real bed with real pillows, and the silence of a room that held nothing but me. My daughter called 4 times that morning. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. I took a long, hot shower without worrying about whether anyone was waiting. I sat in the armchair by the window and watched the parking lot fill and empty. I called my sister in Portland, and she laughed and cried at the same time and said, "Good, good for you." My daughter's first voicemail was confused. Her second was hurt. Her third was angry just beneath the surface of it, not quite breaking through, because she wasn't sure yet how much I knew. Her fourth was quiet, and at the end of it her voice did something I hadn't heard in a very long time. It broke, just slightly, on the word mom. I listened to that fourth message 3 times. That is the part people don't tell you about. They tell you about standing up for yourself. They tell you about the moment you walk out the door, which is supposed to feel like freedom. And it does. It genuinely does. But it also feels like loss. She is still my daughter. She will always be my daughter. I am not the kind of woman who can flip a switch and simply stop. But I am also not the kind of woman who sleeps on a cot in a basement while her daughter practices how to ask for $600,000. I moved into the independent living community 3 weeks later. The unit on the first floor with the courtyard garden. My furniture arrived from the storage unit I had kept in Asheville. And the first morning I woke up in my own bed, with my own things around me, with light coming through the windows at an angle I had chosen. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a long moment. I thought about Gerald. I thought about his coffee mug still on the counter in Asheville, and the way I couldn't look at it for weeks. And then one day I washed it and put it in a box, and that felt right too. I thought about all the years of being needed as a mother, as a wife, as a librarian, as the person who organized every holiday and remembered every birthday and kept the whole machinery of a family running so smoothly that no one ever thought to ask how. I thought, I am 68 years old, and I have never in my adult life asked what I want. Not specifically, not for myself. So I sat in the morning light and I asked. I wanted to read books I had been meaning to read for 20 years. I wanted to take the watercolor class offered in the activity room on Tuesday afternoons, which I had noticed on the calendar when I toured the building and then felt embarrassed about noticing. I wanted to have coffee with my neighbor down the hall, a woman named Margaret, who walked with a cane and told jokes that made me genuinely laugh. I wanted to drive to Portland in the spring and spend 2 weeks with my sister. I wanted to plant hydrangeas in the courtyard, and I asked the building manager, and she said yes. My daughter came to see me 6 weeks after I moved out. She stood in my doorway looking at my apartment, the furniture from Asheville, the books on the shelves, the small painting of the Blue Ridge Mountains that had hung in our bedroom for 3 decades, and I watched her face go through several things at once. "It's nice," she said finally. "It's really nice, Mom." "I know," I said. "Come in." We sat at my kitchen table. I made coffee. For a long time, neither of us said anything important. She talked about my granddaughter. I talked about Margaret down the hall. The weather was mentioned twice, and then my daughter put her cup down, and she looked at the table, and she said, "I'm sorry about the basement." I waited. I told myself it was just temporary. I told myself you wouldn't mind. I think I told myself a lot of things. She looked up. "And the money." "I shouldn't have. I was going to ask you. I had a whole plan for how to ask you." She stopped. "I was treating you like a problem to solve. And you're my mother." I looked at my daughter. I looked at the person I had held at 3 a.m., through fevers and nightmares, the person who was 5 years old and 7 years old and 15 years old and 28 and now 41, all at the same time, the way children always are when you're their parent. Yes, I said. I am. I don't know how to fix it, she said. I know you don't, I said. But you can start with the truth. When something is hard, when something is too much, you can call me and say that. You don't have to engineer it. You don't have to plan how to talk to me. I'm your mother, not a mark. She flinched at that word. I had meant her to. Did you hear us? She asked quietly. Yes, I said. I heard you. She nodded. She pressed her lips together and nodded again. And I watched her absorb it, not the version of events she had been constructing in her head for 6 weeks, but the real one. She had been heard. The thing she had hoped was private was not private. And still I was sitting here, in my own kitchen, pouring coffee, not destroying her. I love you, she said. I love you too, I said. That's not in question. It was never in question. But I am not going to be managed. And I am not going to be stored in a basement. And I am not going to give you my money because you need it and I happen to be convenient. I know. Good, I said. Now tell me something true about how things actually are. Not the version you prepared. And I'll tell you what I can actually do to help. Not because you asked me the right way, but because you're my daughter and I love you, and I have been a mother long enough to know that the best thing I can do for you has never been to make things easy. We talked for 3 hours. Real talking, the kind that costs something, that leaves you tired in an honest way. She told me about the business loan and what had actually gone wrong, not the carefully edited version from the living room conversation. I listened. I asked questions. I did not offer money. I offered something better. I told her what I would have done, based on 32 years of watching institutions manage impossible budgets with grace, and I told her who she could call. And I told her she was smarter than she was giving herself credit for. Before she left, she hugged me at the door. A real hug. Both arms. I'm glad you're close, she said. So am I said. And I meant it. In a different way than I had meant it standing on the sidewalk 12 weeks before, with my suitcases, and my hope, and my talent for telling myself things were good signs. This was a real good sign. After she left, I stood in the quiet of my apartment and listened to it. My own quiet. A quiet I had chosen and paid for and arranged around myself like furniture. The light was going gold through the courtyard windows, and outside I could see the bare garden bed where I had cleared space for the hydrangeas. I had ordered them that morning, white ones, and a deep blue that reminded me of Asheville. They would come up in spring. I sat in my chair and I opened the book I had been meaning to read for 11 years. An actual specific book. Not a metaphor, and I read the first page, and then the second, and I did not stop to consider whether anyone needed me or whether I was being too much or not enough, and I did not run a single calculation in the back of my mind about what I should be feeling versus what I actually felt. I was 68 years old. I had buried a husband and sold a house and slept on a cot in a basement. I had stood in a hallway holding a glass of water and learned something about my daughter that broke my heart. And I had come out the other side of it without breaking with it. I had an apartment with real windows, and a neighbor who told good jokes, and a courtyard that would have hydrangeas in it come April. I turned the page. That was enough. That was more than enough. That, I decided, was everything.